Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, again. Welcome to the session Lost in Translation, Hurdles and Opportunities in the Translation of Scientific Discovery to Clinics and the Market. We are Martin Kaiser. My name is Markus Erath. We are co-chairing this session, taking 1 hour. We heard a lot about hurdles in the last session in translation, so it's my pleasure now to introduce two very competent speakers about telling us how to overcome the hurdles and how to create opportunities. Our first speaker is Haskal. He made his PhD thesis at the University of Southern California. He spent quite some time in Princeton University and the thesis topic was in electrical engineering, material science, and applied physics. Haskal then went to the industry. He spent almost 20 years in Philips and at IBM Research, making the industrial experience. He is currently Director of Knowledge Transfer and Innovation at the National Council of Competence in Research, Bioinspired Materials in Bern. The second presentation will be from Sally McArthur. Sally made a PhD at the University of New South Wales in Australia in biomedical engineering, in optometry, and particularly in contact lenses. And now she is a professor at Swinburne University, Faculty of Science, Engineering and Technology in Melbourne, and has a joint appointment in CSIRO, manufacturing also in Melbourne. So welcome, the floor is all yours. Please hold to the time, it's about 22 minutes each, and then we have a discussion.
All right, I'll try to keep it on time. So, good afternoon, thank you for staying awake until this time. You know that at 6 o'clock there are drinks. So I'm going to take a little bit of risk here because we're basically the first speakers, Sally and I, that get a chance to introduce you to a new subject for most of you. You're all technical experts, or you will be technical experts. At some point, this is assumed that if you have a PhD, you're a technical expert in some field. But what we're going to talk about is translation, and or how you bring an idea to an innovation and how you bring an innovation to the market. This is a field of its own right. In business, management, entrepreneurship, most of you have not had any exposure to this at all, so we've decided to go back to the basics and give you a little bit of an introduction to the fact that there's an entire body of knowledge. I must say that normally I give this in 13 weeks, a semester of training, or a one-day workshop, and now I have 21 minutes left because I've just used one, or 19 if I promised. So, what is technology translation? We're going to start with some definitions. It's about capturing value. It's about valorization of research results and eventually leading to business creation. That's the entrepreneurship route. This is also true if you do intrapreneurship. If you work inside a company, an existing industry, and you bring research forward, you develop it into a product, it's basically about capturing value from research. Now, a lot of you are in academia, and the value that you capture from academia is shown here. You get your results from research, you get your publication, you make your professor happy. If you're not a professor, you get new grants and you keep working. Maybe your group grows or whatever. You're bringing new knowledge to the world. That's just great. When you start thinking about an application, you really have to think about the societal value that you're bringing. There's an economic value, there's money at the end, and you really have to think about the products and the services that you're bringing. Now, capturing the value, some of the value here is obviously intellectual property. So instead of publishing a scientific result, you quickly patent something and then you can publish the scientific result. It works that way, IP then publication, not the other way around. And there's also know-how, which is something else, something you know how to do better than everybody else, but maybe which can't be patented. But basically, what this does, the main point here is technology translation is about capturing value at some point. Now, this value is, there's a few ways to look at it, and I'm not going to go through, again, 13 weeks of lessons. the most important thing that you have to match is, and I'll go through this quickly, you have to identify what it is, what need that you're solving. So what is somebody's need? Some problem, like Dave Granger gave this morning, an entire list of needs, of problems where there's no good solution, which requires great research and a new product, a new innovation to answer that question and then save human lives. And you have to identify that need and match your solution to it, okay? The two key words on this slide, which I'm going to come back to a few times, are customers and innovation. So the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about innovation, and then we'll come back to customers a little bit later. But customers, where your research, where your innovation, where your value is going to land is something that you have to think of from the very beginning. Okay, that's a very important point. That's why it's in red on the slide, because without customers, there is no business, there is no need for your innovation. Okay, definitions. I could have asked all of you, what is an innovation? I might have gotten a variety of different answers. This is the one I like. It's the process of translating an idea or an invention, so an idea which then becomes an invention, that's like a patent, into a good or a service which creates value for which someone will pay, a customer will pay. Okay? I'm going to repeat myself. Without the customer here, it's not an innovation. It has to be something that somebody will pay for. Okay? There has to be value which is realized through somebody paying some money. Okay? That means they play an integral role as a customer in the development of an idea or an invention into an innovation. Technology translation, you know what, I'll let you read these. I'll let you read that next one. You're going to come into contact with your TT office, your technology transfer office at some point if you're interested in developing innovations, developing a good or a service from some of your research. You're going to come into contact with these people and they're going to guide you by the hand in a good way or a bad way into the contracts necessary for doing this. I'm not going to waste anybody's time talking about it. If you decide to do this by yourself, in other words, if you don't go to industry and you don't collaborate closely with industry and they buy your patent or develop your product or hire you, and you decide to be an entrepreneur, there's two words you have to know. Yes, of course, you're going to start a business, but implicit in being an entrepreneur is risk. Okay, if you're not taking any risks in setting up your business as an entrepreneur, you're not an entrepreneur. That's just the way it is. There is no guaranteed success. There is always a risk associated with becoming an entrepreneur. Okay, those are the definitions. I don't think I'm going to show you any more definitions. If you walk away with the idea that customers play an integral role in what an innovation is, I think you've done okay for today. All right, let's talk about academia. Most of you are in academia. Let's talk about academia and the difference between business and academia. The value of research in academia, I've just said, it's really defined by its scientific impact, by the number of publications you're going to get. And maybe recognition, there are a lot of tremendous professors here with 500 papers or 200 papers. They've shaped their fields, they've made valuable contributions, they've saved human lives, indeed, through their research. And that's enough. That's enough. You get your Nobel Prize, you get 100 Nature papers or whatever. That's great. As soon as it starts getting closer to an application, a product, a service, for a lot of people it gets boring. And this is cultural, but in the US I talk to a lot of professors that say, no, that's where it really gets interesting. But in Europe, it's a lot of, no, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I'm a fundamental researcher. I want to work on my research. So it's a little bit difficult to generalize, but as soon as it starts moving toward applications, and I have here pre-launch and all sorts of words like prototypes, normally interest drops. Now, in the business world, success criteria are not defined by your publications, not defined by the impact of the science in your Nobel Prize or your number of Nature papers that you have. The value is really things that you've heard about. It's about how fast can you get it to the market. It's about your profit margin. It's that it's reliably predictable in manufacturing, that you really get reproducibility on your product. And there in business, that's when motivation and interest climb. Okay, the more research results are driven toward applications and marketable products, that's where companies really get interested. Okay, because there's money there at the end. They're going to sell something that customers are going to pay for. So this should make sense to you, because that's really where revenue comes into play. Now, you've heard this term, but just to clearly define it for most of you, the lack of interest and motivation from both sides, either the business side or the academic and scientific side, to transform these research results into the new products, the viable prototypes, and the services which create value, that's often called the valley of death. Now, you've heard that, perhaps. It's very, very difficult to pull your research through intellectual property, that's where you capture value, typically, into the development of something which someone will pay for, right? There's a big gap there, and it costs money. And this valley of death, or this financial valley of death, where you're mortgaging your house, or you don't have any income to pay your rent, is a real problem, okay? And I'm warning you, that's typically where entrepreneurs face their biggest risk. They're developing their first product that they think that they can sell, but they run into money issues, and there's no interest from business on that side to pull it all the way through. Okay, how do you bridge this gap, the valley of death? How do you move from research, from academic, scientific impact results to revenue, to business? There's two factors, okay, and I think these slides are going to be available, so I don't know how fast you can copy. I had to put a reference in here. Innovators that are successful to bridging this gap need creative intelligence, okay? And this is from the classic person from Harvard, Clayton Christensen, who's written a series of books about innovation. And I encourage you to read them all, because you'll be surprised. You'll learn a lot of new terms and how to move things forward. But in one of the later books that he wrote, there's really 5 characteristics. And if I have to, while you go through these, there's really a couple of things that I've observed in terms of entrepreneurs, in terms of people who are real innovators, that leverage their creative intelligence, that show that they have the ability to move to the next stage, to revenue. And that is, number one, questioning, okay? You are academic, you're trained to question, you develop hypotheses and question your research to see whether you actually did something right, or is that result actually correct? Maybe you have to reproduce it. You're challenging assumptions. You're open to criticism, and you're listening to what people have to tell you in terms of unrelated problems or unrelated questions, but you're really challenging yourself. You're questioning. Now, the other thing is, and this I can't stress enough for PhD students, you have to network. You have to meet people who provide different ideas to balance out your own. You have to get out of your shell and try to get a different perspective about your research in order to try to move it to an innovation. Now, I've already said a very important word is customer. Customers are your best source of information of providing different ideas based on your research. Those are the people from industry or whatever that will tell you, that's not what I need something else. Okay, that's people with a special set of skills can become entrepreneurs or innovators, it's irrelevant, to get them through this valley of death. The second thing is again, this part about building up demonstrations, building up something that really shows people what you have, not just PowerPoints, but really shows people what you have, de-risking their engagement from a business perspective, and you can even bring some customers along that say, I'm going to give you some money for that thing. Okay, that's really what pulls you into revenue, these two things. So think about your creative intelligence. Think about getting a little bit more knowledge, which is what we're doing right now, Sally and I. We're giving you new knowledge on a body of management literature and entrepreneurship information, which you might not have been exposed to in the past, and trying to build up your creative intelligence in terms of bringing your ideas to market. Okay. What do you need to translate effectively? You need to know what the problem is that you're solving. Okay, it's not just your solution that's important. You have to know how to ask the question which your solution is answering. Okay, now, again, Dave Granger provided a whole list of questions. That's just great. I rarely see that. Such a clear and concise list of problems that industry, even industry, this was a professor, but still, even industry comes forward and says, these are our problems. You typically need partners in, I'm giving a very general talk, and Sally will as well. We're not going to talk about bio necessarily. I think a lot of what we're talking about is applicable, but ultimately you will need partners to move this into clinical studies. You're not going to have $300 million to do this yourself. Okay, that's not going to happen. So you're going to need to work with partners. You're going to need some intellectual property, IP. That's your bargaining chip, that's your value. You're going to need a market opportunity, that's the problem that you're going to solve, which nobody else can solve in a way that you can. Okay, that's your target. Those are your customers that you're going to talk to. And you're going to need all sorts of collaborations. Unfortunately, also money, financial people, people you have no experience with, you're also going to have to learn that if you try to move this way. Okay. Why collaborate with industry? I've just told you you're going to have to collaborate in some way or another with industry at some point. Even if you become an entrepreneur and you start your own business in your garage, at some point you're going to want to upscale, you're going to want to move forward. It's not true for 0.01% of the businesses. Okay? But most of the businesses are like this. You're going to have to work with clinical partners, industry partners. There's a variety of reasons to do that. They will help you by giving you the problems, providing feedback on your solutions. They will help you with money. They will provide you nice, gentle feedback and a good feeling of satisfaction when you've sold some of your work. Also a nice little amount of money in your bank account. They will provide you access to materials, equipment, and expertise. These are important things which you, as soon as you're out of the lab in academia, it's kind of hard to get access to unless you pay money, a lot of money. Maybe, I don't know what the prices are at VIS or at a variety of other places. VPFL, I know, is very expensive. You can pay it, but it's expensive. Okay. How to. If you've believed what I've just said, that it's important to work with clinical partners and industry partners, and I've gone very quick through this, but if you believe that this is important to move your ideas forward into innovations, then there's a couple of things that you're going to have to learn how to do, okay? You're going to have to, again, figure out the challenges, the problems. We've already gone over that. You have to be able to develop a clear vision for those customers. What is your solution bringing to the table? Where's the value there? You have to, when you say, I need to do research in order to complete that, you have to be realistic, okay? Because this is now your rent, your mortgage, your house on the line, okay? This is not somebody kind of paying your way, okay? You can't say, oh, that'll take me a week to do, when you kind of in the back of your mind know it's going to take 6 months. That doesn't work. You need to find partners who are committed to you, not just a gentle, hey, it's great what you're doing, you know, we'd love to hear about it when you come back in 9 months. These are people who are committed, who are sitting there with you, maybe every week, even though that's painful, but they're there with you, and they're really committed to your result because they've been convinced that your solution is something they need. It's easier to do that when they're close by. Physical proximity is a good way to develop mutual trust. Start with something small before you jump to something big, because you don't know whether they're committed, you don't know whether you trust them. Talk to your network, listen to people, and have them tell you whether that's a trustworthy partner, somebody that you can really get along with. You have to know what things are going to cost you. If you're going to do research still, and that includes R&D, development into prototypes, you have to make a reasonable estimate as to what that's going to cost. Okay, there's a lot of talk about, oh, I got $2 million and angel, and then I got 5 million Series A, and then I went to Series B and all this. You know what? A lot of that comes later. The first thing you need to know is what it's really going to cost to move your idea into an innovation, into a product. That's something that only you can do, that you have to develop. Eventually, that'll be part of your business plan. But clearly, you have to know this. Now, rights and obligations about IP, that's where your value is. You have to be very careful about maintaining this value, because without that, somebody will just steamroll you and move away and just take everything you've done, okay? They might not even hire you after that happens. Unfortunately, that's how life works. Okay, Customers. Why is the customer so important? Remember, I told you there was one message I wanted to get across here. Customers. Here are all the reasons why customers are important. They pay you. Their needs define what you're providing to them. Okay, listen to what they provide. Don't say, oh, but I've got this thing. You know, I've got this great breakfast cereal. And they come forward and say, no, I wanted a barbecue. And they say, no, but the breakfast cereal. No, the barbecue. No, the breakfast cereal. It doesn't work this way. If they want a barbecue, they're getting a barbecue. Okay? They can influence how your customer base grows. People talk to each other. This is the network working behind your back. What they're willing to pay defines the cost of what you're selling. You will end up in a close, mutual trust, committed relationship with them, with your customer. This is often what happens. And I cannot stress enough that you should start to deal with them early on in order to develop this trust and relationship early on. And finally, you have to adapt. That's a whole nother discussion in its own right about what is the first product that you're going to come up with, a minimum viable product or an MVP. What is the first thing that you're going to try to sell that's based on your first customer, what they want. Okay, they don't want the breakfast cereal, they want the barbecue. Okay, clear communication. As a last point, I think this is my last slide, Sally, so you're going to have to jump in. It's really critically important that you're able to express yourself coherently. And I know that sounds silly to be telling a wide audience like this, but if you can't explain what, for example, your PhD research is, what your solution is, what your idea is, in a couple of minutes, clearly, to perhaps a layman, but someone who's technically skilled but not in your particular field of technical expertise, then you're doing something wrong. Okay, you have to be able to learn this skill. This will help you no matter what you do, whether you're in academia and you're giving scientific talks, or whether you go into industry, whether you become an entrepreneur and you're pitching to a crowd for money, you're still going to have to be able to do this very, very clearly in a very coherent way. Okay, that's my 20 minutes. I will say two slides about Switzerland, and I know that a lot of you are not in Switzerland. Based on data that is available from the Federal Office of Statistics, which everybody can download, if you do the math and you go through the Excel sheets, nearly 50% of all R&D expenditures, that's from businesses, the federal government, universities, and a variety of others, nearly 50% of all R&D expenditures, if you look at this in a broad way, is in health. So the fact that we're at the Biointerfaces International, I'm telling you about innovations, okay, because a lot of you will go into health domains, medtech, pharma, nutrition, whatever. This is really the environment to do it. Now, this is a little bit skewed because of Novartis and Roche, and this is where they have their company headquarters. But clearly, Switzerland is really the place to do your health R&D. Okay, this is the place to move it forward. The financial support environment is improving. We hear a lot about that on the federal scale, but it's not as robust as the US or in Asia in a lot of places. This is just the way it is. I think we have to work on that generally. But clearly, if you're working on health projects, this is the place to do it. Finally, and I'm not advertising for them because I don't work for them, but InnoSwiss, the federal government's solution for helping innovations along, has a great free program. So if you want to learn more about what I've just told you, you should sign up for some of these projects, some of these modules, and they will give you the toolbox and everything. It's not our job to teach you here in 20 minutes, but InnoSwiss can do this. So innoswiss.ch, I think that's a great thing to do. It is the one that's supported in this country. So that's it. Thank you.
There you go. So I'll add in, InnoSwiss does this here in Switzerland. We have a number of agencies in Australia who do similar programs, and they run all sorts of things. There's loads of different programs in the US. And I bet if you look around in your country, there will be a program that you can go along to if you want to learn more about this. But we are actually going to make you sing for your Aperol. So you've all got a handout from me or from Michelle at the back. Now, what I need you to do is to be within conversational distance with one other person. So if you're not currently in a position to actually talk to anybody, please move. give you a couple of seconds just to do that. Thank you. Thank you. Better still, think about whether you should talk to the person who's sitting next to you who you probably already know really well, or turn around and talk to somebody behind you who perhaps doesn't know you so well. Oh, thank you. Yes, full lights would be perfect. So, there should be some more copies, yeah. Thank you. Clicker, I've got this. Tap dancing. Nobody's going to make friends with you, Alvin. Can somebody make friends with Alvin, please? I'm sure he's got lots of fabulous insights. He works in industry. He would be really good to talk to. Okay. So if I can have everybody back. You can always work in threes if that's easier. It's just the time will be a bit short for everybody to have a conversation. So, hi. So what we're going to do is take you through some of those ideas that Eliav was just talking about and work on a template that you can use in future. So this model that I'm going to be talking about can be used for almost anything. Okay, it's a really good, there's a business model canvas that goes with it. This one I use as a research impact canvas. So the goal is to get impact from your research and to identify where the opportunities are to get impact from your research. But the key thing that this is about is finding the value. And finding the value, some of you may be a little concerned with the word customer, stakeholder might be a nicer word for you, I don't know. Somebody who's going to pay. Now, in some ways, that could be a grant funding agency as well. So you can use this same concept to talk to a great grant funding agency as well. It's just the language changes ever so slightly. And we use it in my team all the time to try and get our ideas down before we get to grant stages as well. The other way you could think about it is I'm going for a job interview. My employer is my stakeholder. What do they want from me as the product? You're now selling yourself. And so it's a really interesting way of thinking that through as well. So we've got to define today some type of value for the customer. That's what we want to come away with today. And if I don't press the wrong buttons. And so what we're going to come up with by the end of this session, and it's really quick. So this is not about having all the answers. This is about having some of the questions and getting a framework that you can take outside and run experiments with. Those of you who aren't experimental scientists, I'm sorry, but the rest of us might be. You're going to run some experiments. So that's what we're going to frame up. So the value proposition is a business or marketing statement that summarises why somebody should use your service or buy your product. What's going to be attractive to them about the idea that you have. So it's going to convince them that they need to do something. And it clarifies the goals. So when Eliav was talking about what's your PhD about and why should somebody care about it, that's the type of thing. It's getting that quick, punchy, well, what I do is, what that means, and what this is what it's going to enable. You know, I'm curing cancer, all the rest of it. You might be fibbing in there a little, so don't do that. But you're going to get that together, so you've got a really nice simple pitch for your idea. So that's where this research impact canvas comes in. So what we're trying to see is what are the questions and what are the opportunities that you could look at for the translation and the relationships you need to build to help you do that. It's all about people. Machines don't generally give you funding. Machines generally don't partner with you. People partner with you. So the conversations you're having, the networking you're having, are about personal contact. And it's about understanding people. And we all do that differently, so you've got to find a way to make that work for you as well. But these sort of tools can help you understand, well, this is what I'd want to know from these people. This is the questions I want to ask them. So this is what I've given you. You've got the canvas with sort of the attributes of each of the different boxes. Now, the first thing to note here is that not all of these boxes are the same size. And something about the size of the box tells you about how important the concept is that you need to get to. And so we can start down here on who you are. That's pretty important. What you're aiming to get to, that's really important. Your unique value proposition is hugely important, and that's what we'll be building on today. But the solution, which is probably where you're starting from, is less important. Because if the solution doesn't match a problem and a stakeholder, or a problem for that stakeholder, it doesn't matter how great the solution is. You're not going to have a good value proposition for them. Okay? So this is where those ideas about pivoting come in. So as we move through this, we're going to do some very fast prototyping. You've got a canvas. You're going to come out of this with a prototype pitch for one idea that you have for one stakeholder. So just pick one in your mind now. You'll have a set of experiments that you can run, and you've got a tool that you can bring out and use in more detail. But what I want to emphasise to you today is just sitting down with this type of tool for half an hour can give you a lot of impact very, very quickly. A lot of ideas rather than, oh, I don't know, sitting down and talking to people for 4 hours. Okay? So that's the key advantage I find with it anyway. So let's get started. So the first goal for you is to describe and define your research domain to give a really big picture. So in each of these cases, I'll give you an example that relates to me and use that as we run through. So you want to avoid technical jargon in these sort of descriptions, because even the person sitting next to you who might be in exactly the same field as you think, probably doesn't use the same jargon that you use. And particularly if you're talking to a clinician, the words you use to describe surfaces or interfaces are completely different. They see a different thing when you talk about surfaces and interfaces. So you need to keep the words really simple. So for me, well, the not to do is I research biosurface interfaces. I do plasma polymers, XPS, TOF sims and ELISA. Not really nice. But maybe it's better to say in the way of my research looks at ways of connecting biology and technology. We look, these have got timers on them. We research ways to control how proteins and cells attach to surfaces to help make better medical devices. It's simpler. It may not be perfect for the person you're going to speak to, but it's a starting point. So I want you, with the person you're sitting next to have a little conversation. You've got 2 minutes each to have that conversation and try and explain simply what your research is about to them. Ready, set, go. Okay, everybody, you need to make sure you're having the other person having their 2 minutes now. If you run out of conversational points, that's amazing, but put some notes down on the blank sheet of what you've come up with as your pitch of what your research is about. Okay, what I want you to do next is just very quickly jot down a few notes so that you can remember the really brilliant things that you came up of your simple description of your research. They go on the template that I've given you, the blank one. That's why you've got a blank one to actually fill in today. And then we'll move straight ahead with identifying the customer that you're going to think about or the stakeholder that you're going to think about. So the stakeholder is your groups of people that you're targeting your research to. So depending on who it is today, there will always be multiple stakeholders who you need to engage with. So you pick one stakeholder for today and you build up this model for that stakeholder. Okay? You'll go back later, pick a different stakeholder and do the same process again because they should vary. depending on whether you're talking about your stakeholder being a clinician that you're trying to have a conversation with, and a clinician in a specific area, a nurse who you might want to have a conversation with, you might be talking to somebody from industry who maybe supplies the materials that you're after. There's lots of different stakeholders in this. They're all the people that you're going to need. They may be a research partner in another organisation that you need to do preclinical trials with. So pick one. And that's who we're going to build this unique value proposition for. So pick your stakeholder. So then the next thing you need to do is to work out, for that stakeholder, what are 3 big things that you think they want to solve? Not what you think your product will solve for them at this stage. What do you think the biggest issues are for that stakeholder? They don't know anything about your research yet. So what do you think comes to mind when they think about, today I wish I could solve? So for an example, for an industry partner, how do we make new tissues for replacing skin in burns victims? So you think about, I think I want to work in skin. I think my ideas are going to work for replacing skin. So I want to be able to go out and talk to industry about the challenges of making skin. And so I think about, well, what do I think? And these are all our assumptions at this stage. What do I think their problems are? It's really hard when you're growing skin to time it for where and when people need the skin to be put on their bodies. In addition, the production process isn't particularly efficient to make skin, and it needs to be done locally and at the hospital, perhaps that person is being treated at. And that combination of it needing to be local, but also the timing, makes it a pretty risky sort of thing. So for an industry partner to invest in or to get engaged in skin tissue engineering, they're going to want maybe to be able to address those 3 points. There's probably 60 million other things that they'd want as well. But in the next 2 minutes each, in your pairs, think about, for the customer that you've got, what are some of the key things you think they'd like to have answered? And what problems are they facing? Okay, go. Dog in the air. Okay, if I can have everyone back. So just quickly note down the key things that you thought of into the key problem part of your canvas. And now we get to talk about the solution. But I want you to think about the solution that actually solves the problems that you thought of. So what is it that your solution could do to address those 3 or 2 ideas that you think industry have? Again, we're at the assumption stage. You have to get out there and talk to people to turn those assumptions into knowledge, okay, or actual information that you're going to be looking at. So, again, think about what you could do that would address those challenges and how you would want to talk about those challenges to people. So here, for me, I'm talking about skin. So we aim to produce skin grown from iPS cells. Now, I'm assuming somebody knows what an iPS cell is. That's a first start. But what I'm then saying is this means that any patient could use the skin. We're going to centralise the production process of the cell and the scaffold production, and then that will allow hospitals and local facilities to expand the cells as required for their local needs. So because I'm using a common cell source, it means that any patient can have it, so I've eliminated the need for self-autologous sort of transfer. This is all lovely fantasy world, I've got to say. Okay, so the next 4 minutes, 2 minutes each, think about how your solution can be used to map onto those challenges that you think are out there for the industry partner. Go. We're not doing questions.
We have no questions?
No, because we're trying to get this through, yeah.
You don't want?
No, I Okay, everyone, come back together. And we'll just do this final activity, which is where we start to bring this together. And this is how you work on getting a pitch together. So this is a pretty simple way of just gathering together. It's probably 30 seconds of something that you can start with somebody. And so individually, you can just have a play around with this. So for this stakeholder who are unhappy with something, oops, just let me get rid of that. Turn it off. For this staker who's unhappy with whatever problem they're trying to solve, what things were that you identified, my research solves this issue by. Okay? It's a really simple way of putting your ideas together, but focused on the customer need. Okay? So you've just a couple of minutes to play with that. And it's just, you can just do it by yourself, you can pitch it to each other if you want to by the end, and we'll come back together in a second. 2 minutes.
The classic business canvas. Das hat sie sauber als Research Impact Canvas
Okay.
von der Sally entwickelt. Aber es ist genau der Business Canvas.
So before I get in any more trouble with the timekeeping Swiss elements here that I've completely destroyed.
One slider.
Everybody?
Yeah, it's a one slide, that's it.
So, you've now all got a little something that you can practice with when we go and have drinks and you're meeting other people. You can test it out. It's perfect. You're ready to go and start your networking career for connecting up with people. We will put these slide decks available for people if they're interested in looking at them. As we said, though, this is the starting point. It's giving you a tool that might help you simplify. You need to work out if this works for you as well. But it helps you simplify and work through a process. And I find a process helps me get my ideas down. So I'm hoping that it will help you too. Do we have any questions at this point from anybody?
Often with industry partners, you just hear how good their products are and how good everything is, and you don't really hear what the problem is. So especially from people from academia, it's really tricky to find out what's a current problem because nobody talks about the problems they're having. How would you recommend to address this if you're sitting at your desk in the office?
So the way oh, Alvin, do you want to answer that yet?
Medical device industry. From the medical device industry, if you ask another company in a business-to-business relationship, you will always get caged answers because maybe they're trying to protect another product. So their real needs are not openly declared. Often what we do is we have a three-pronged approach. Is you go to the customer's customer, which may be the clinician. So you'd survey 6 clinicians in the US, 6 clinicians in Europe, and get an answer. And then you couple that with canvassing companies and looking at the direction that intellectual property is taking you. And normally by that strategic analysis, you get a sense of whether these unmet questions or unmet needs are real or imagined, because a lot of people use it to try and make unfavorable remarks about a competitor product and so on. So you have to be very careful and really get to the source, but always cross-check and cross-validate. That's at least how I approach
it. So for me, the answer is this is part of your trust relationship that you have with any business that you're going to work with. When you walk in the door and they don't know you from anyone, they're not going to reveal anything to you, obviously. So this is part of your problem. The way to leverage this is through a network. So that's not an easy answer, but clearly that's the best way to do things. Second best is that you have to be able ultimately to read through the lines. I mean, we've heard a few people speak today about what the problems are, which are facing which are faced in industry, and they're not in industry. So they've managed to read through the lines, a lot of literature, gone through product lists. This is a lot of experience. You can talk to academic people. But again, I agree, you have to cross-check everything before you start putting your house on the line. That's, so there's not an easy answer to this, but really identifying the problem is the critical part of the entire story. It's not finding the solution. It's really the problem identification.
I have a related question up here. I think most of the success stories of the past maybe 20, 30 years are related to products where you had no customer when you started with, because nobody knew that we need them. So how do you deal with that situation? So if I have an idea where there is really not yet a customer, I mean, how do I convince the stakeholders to actually go after this?
Yeah. So I mean, I've had 20 minutes to speak. Okay, but so really, there's a classic diagram that people use, which is, it's a 2x2 square where you have old and new market, and you have old and new technology. And what you're actually asking about is the development of a new technology for a new market, which doesn't exist. And yes, there's tremendous amount of value in that box of this 2x2 square, which matches a new market with a new technology. But it's really hard to move forward because you're taking risk on both the technology development and also the fact that the market will develop in the direction that you expect your solution to attract. So we hear about success stories, we don't hear about failures. Okay, 90% of businesses fail with these types of, at this stage. So if you have a really great solution and you're moving into a new market, all the power to you. You're convinced and you're taking that risk by the hand and you've got a vision, but be well aware of the fact that there is a significant chance of failure. Now, how are you being convincing to someone who's going to buy your solution into this new market? Yeah, luck. Luck is the best answer here. Network and luck. So there is no clear. I mean, if someone wants to contradict me, please go ahead. But this is my experience. Go ahead. You have a significant.
Well, I have a question too about the filing of IP.
Yeah.
So you said that it's wise to file as soon as you have the technology fixed, because then you can publish. But my experience is that, especially in drugs, the development times are that long, 10 to 15 years, that the patent will then expire soon, and then you have no protection anymore of your technology. So.
Yeah, again, a generalization for pharma, there are special cases. Okay, so what you want to do is, it takes 10 years to get through the clinical study. So if you patented 10 years ago, your fees have gone up tremendously, exponentially by the time you're actually thinking of making any money. So you want to delay that process as long as possible. But speaking to an academic audience here, the generalization I've just made is that two things. Once you publish, you can't patent. And if you think that you have value that you eventually will want to retain and leverage, you have to patent it first before publishing. That's all the point I wanted to make. It's not about doing it as quickly as possible. It's about doing it before you publish. That was the message that I was trying to get across. Now, it's a similar answer to creating a company if you're creating a new business. People think, oh, the first thing I have to do is create my company because I've got this idea. That's nonsense as far as I'm concerned. The only reason to create a company is when you have revenue, or you have to have somewhere to put the money that you're either putting out or putting in. But that, again, this is just, so there's a lot of details here that I don't want to gloss over. But you're right. What we didn't talk about is the price, the cost of IP. Filing is a lot of money for PhD students. Then it's cheap for you for 4 years, and then it gets more after 4 more years, and then it starts going up. And if you haven't made that, if you never think you're going to make that money back, then you've basically just bet on the wrong horse.
So my thing is that making academic career should not rely only on publication rates. So I think making a career in the translational field should also be possible within the university. And this, I think, it's at least in Switzerland not possible now. So this is a mind change in the universities.
This is a long discussion as far as the ability of professors, for example, which is again a generalization, the ability of professors to involve themselves with an industrial commitment, whether it's their own or an external company. Okay, and I think grants are okay. Getting industrial funding is okay for a lot of universities, the 2 ETHs certainly in Switzerland. Even chairs sponsored by industry, the 2 ETHs, but this is not true for a lot, actually the broad majority of universities in Switzerland outside of these two. Okay, again I'm generalizing, but I think Basel allows it, but if I were to go to Fribourg or Bern and say I have a chair from industry they want to pay, you know, the answer might very well be forget it, we don't want it. Okay, industry funding, okay, as long as they don't have an influence over academic freedom. Now at the ETH, I'm well aware of the fact that professors are hired here to teach and do research, not to start their businesses. And this, if you look to MIT or places in the US as a guideline, there are also strict regulations about how much time and equity that professors, as academic scientists, can take in the businesses that they're involved in, that maybe stem out of their lab. And this is a really tricky point. I'm standing in ETH and I'm saying this, but I don't know who's doing it right and who's doing it wrong. So we might have different opinions. So this is tricky.
Okay.
The way I see it, IP is threefold. You've got patents, you've got trademarks, trade secrets, but you've also got what is often not leveraged is material files that go through regulatory processes. A patent decays over 18 years. A master file gets more valuable if you can show that a given material or a given solution can be reapplied. And that's like compound interest. We've seen occasions where, because the master file sits at the FDA, you can only give permission to your customer to look at the master file. We're now seeing incidences where companies pay an access fee to leverage the information in the master file for a new device or a new application with the same biomaterial. So I think we should not see intellectual assets as this mono-dimensional thing being patents.
You're absolutely right, yeah. So again, there are multiple dimensions to everything I've said today. So, but this is in this particular industry, which isn't my expertise, quite frankly. This is really where the money stays safe for a long time. Yeah. So the property which can be valorized, but in a lot of other, in pretty much everything else, the goods and services which are patented, it's IP, know-how, trade secrets, and trademark also. Yeah. Okay. So sorry, technical guy. So trademarks, okay.
Okay. Thank you for this nice presentation. For me, it was very helpful. I learned a lot and very interesting subject. So I'm working also on this translational business. So therefore, it was really very nice. Thank you.